A couple of weeks ago I made a video speaking about how the agricultural revolution is an extremely controversial turning point in human history, which despite allowing human populations to explode and the entirety of history to play out, as well as introducing the noble profession of landlords, it left people greedy, alienated and with worse lives than hunter-gatherers. People had gone from small bands of individuals to groups numbering in the millions, and hadn't developed any instincts of mass cooperation. And this video is going to explain how lies or imagined realities collectively believed by entire societies have been required to make these large societies function. Humans had to live in a dramatically different way. After all, the population had gone from some 5 to 8 million foragers in 10,000 BC to 250 million farmers by the 1st century AD. Where foragers had lived hand to mouth, having difficulty preserving food and acquiring possessions, they were able to discount the future because they couldn't really impact it. Farmers had to constantly stress and work to produce a surplus for the future, since a peasant who thought that things would always be good didn't live long. But all over the world, nobilities emerged to live off this surplus, as well as classes of soldiers, artists and priests who fill the history books, building palaces and forts, monuments and temples, and history is something that very few people have been doing whilst everyone else was ploughing fields and carrying water. So having food surpluses and ways to transport them allowed larger and larger communities to appear, joined together by kingdoms and other networks. But the ability to feed all these people doesn't guarantee they'll cooperate. Enough food doesn't guarantee that everyone will agree on property and politics and morality. Food shortages didn't cause most strife in history. The Roman Republic collapsed at its most powerful. Yugoslavia had the facilities to feed everyone but descended into a bloodbath, and the French Revolution was initiated by well-to-do lawyers. Clearly humans don't have developed instincts of mass cooperation and require something else to cooperate. Shared myths or imagined orders we're going to say imagined realities. And yeah, I should make a disclaimer that I'm going to be calling a lot of things myths, all of which are case studies from this book, which simply looks at everything in terms of history and biology and science. So whilst this video will say that a lot of things aren't objectively real and exist just in the collective minds of people, that doesn't mean they aren't good. So for a quick whistle-stop tour of human mass cooperation to get us to our first case study, we're saying that in 8500 BC, some of the first villages like Jericho had a few hundred people. 1,000 years later, towns were in the thousands, and in the coming millennia, city-states with tens of thousands of inhabitants in the Fertile Crescent controlled the surrounding villages. By 3100 BC, the Lower Nile Valley was united into the first Egyptian kingdom, and by 2250 BC, Sargon forged the Akkadian Empire with some 1 million subjects, with larger and larger empires emerging in the following millennia, such as the Assyrian and Babylonian, and the first imagined reality that we're going to look at comes from this empire at around 1777 BC, the Code of Hammurabi, the king of what would become the world's largest city at the centre of the world's largest empire. And it was presented as a set of laws outlined by a just king. The text was copied all over his empire, and it's a good source on ancient Mesopotamian social order. The code states that the gods Anu, Enlil and Marduk appointed Hammurabi to prevent oppression and ensure justice, before listing about 300 crimes and associated punishments, and claims that its laws are based on universal and eternal principles of justice from the gods who gave Hammurabi his power. And the laws are different for people depending on whether they're of the superior, commoner or slave class, as well as if they're a man or a woman. For example, if a superior man strikes and kills a slave, he has to pay the owner 20 shekels of silver. If he kills a commoner woman, he has to pay her family 30 shekels. And if he strikes and blinds the eye of a commoner man, he must pay him 60 shekels. And there's also the funny one, if a man kills another man's daughter, his daughter, who didn't really do anything wrong, is killed. And if a builder builds a shoddy house and it collapses and kills another man's son, the builder's son gets killed. And of course all of this sounds like madness to the modern day. Different justice for different classes, although who really knows what goes on with that, and different justice for men and women, as well as children being their parents' property that can be forfeit. But I'm sure this all seemed perfectly just to the ancient Mesopotamians who believed this shared myth, and believed that acting like this was for the good of all of them, allowing them to have a repeatable and consistent legal system and secure lives. Around 3,500 years later, when the people of the 13 colonies felt they should cast off British rule, and wrote their Declaration of Independence, which claimed universal and eternal principles of justice inspired by their divine power, that being the Christian God, under whom the Americans determined that it is self-evident that all men are created equal, and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. The document also promises that living this way will allow millions of people to cooperate and have secure lives in a prosperous society. And both documents claim to be based on universal and eternal principles of justice, so how can you compare them? The Americans say that all people are equal, the Babylonians claim they're not, and both sides would say they're right and that the other is wrong. And it's easy for us in the modern day to say that some people being superior and others being commoners has no logical or scientific basis. But it's the same with all humans being equal. People are unequal in size, opportunity, intelligence, wealth, power and health, and we all have different odds of survival and success, and the Americans got this idea from the Christian belief that we're all created equal in God's image, and that all souls are equal. It's the same with liberty and human rights. They have no scientific basis and don't objectively exist. They're human imagined realities. And of course many who hear that line of reasoning would say it's outrageous, and would say that of course liberty and equality don't exist biologically, but if we behave as if we were all equal in essence and behave accordingly, granting people liberty, human rights and self-determinism, then we'll have a stable, just and prosperous society. And of course that's the best way to act. It may be an imagined reality that only exists in our minds, that we should behave that way, not because it's objectively true, but because it's the right thing to do and gives us a stable and just society to live in. We can all believe things as a society that aren't scientifically true, and they don't have to be evil conspiracies set up to keep us all in line, but because they're the only way that we can cooperate effectively without having atrocities and injustices committed constantly. But Hammurabi would have used the same logic to defend his system. He knew that superiors, commoners and slaves weren't inherently different kinds of people, but would have thought that if everyone behaved as if they were, they could have a stable and prosperous society, same as the Americans did. I doubt the slaves and the women would have agreed, but that's just how it was. And you can make the same argument with things like money and governments, with humans being the only species able to accept these imagined realities.
Caesar is home.
Animals can communicate, of course, but only about things that exist in the real world. And they can barter, but only with things that are useful and inherently valuable. Try to convince a monkey to give you its banana for some gold and you won't get very far. Gold is useless. Try to convince a monkey that it will go to monkey heaven and get 1,000,000 bananas if it gives you its banana, and you'll probably be attacked. The monkey won't believe you. But humans have been able to apply false value to gold and money, and therefore it has value. Not because it's useful, but because everyone wants it, based on the assumption that everyone else wants it. No other animal has been able to construct such intricate imagined realities, and this is why humans have been able to cooperate on such a large scale. Thanks for watching.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is